Good morning. The Maryland Public Service Commission will come to order. To begin with our business today, we have minutes to approve from the November 13th, 2019 meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Mr. Secretary, the consent agenda, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are 9 items on today's consent agenda. Item 1 is Tier 1 Fiber LLC's application for authority to provide facilities-based and resold local telecommunications services. Item 2 is Level 3 Communication LLC's notice of participation in financing agreement. Item 3 is a notification of intra-company merger from Shentel Communications LLC. Item 4 is a tariff revision from Armstrong Telephone Company. Items 5 through 8 are updated standard offer service rates for Baltimore Gas and Electric Company, Potomac Electric Power Company, Delmarva Power and Light, and Potomac Edison. And finally, item 9 is a negotiated contract from Sandpiper Energy, Inc.
Thank you. I believe commissioners have some questions on these items if staff, council, and the company can approach. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question on item number 2, which is the Level 3 Communications LLC financing participation agreement.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, Kenneth Albert on behalf of staff.
Good morning, Mr. Albert. I wanted to ask you about the quote that's on page 4 of the buck sheet, which is about 40% down the page, and it's talking about the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission's failure to reject, and then there's a quote there that says the financing, quote, is deemed in fact and in law to have registered pursuant to provisions, and it cites some Pennsylvania code there, end quote. So I'm wondering if that quote is from the Pennsylvania Commission's order, or if that quote is from the company's submittal of what they submitted about Pennsylvania's inaction.
No, the company did submit the actual document issued by Pennsylvania.
Right, so my question is, did that quote come out of the document, or did it come from the company?
No, it came from the Pennsylvania document.
Okay,
They're one of those states where technically they don't approve these financings, but if they're not objected to and staff analysis indicates that there's no problems with it, they deem it approved.
So what I'm actually asking then, and I appreciate the answer, is that a statutory provision in Pennsylvania's annotated code that says failure to act by a certain date is deemed approval?
I did not check the statute itself.
Okay. These other states' references I've come to find are a little bit hinky. Usually we require our requirements require another state to approve, but in this case they didn't approve. They just failed to act, and I'm wondering if the statutory requirements in Pennsylvania therefore deem that an approval.
Well, I would add one thing. This has come up before. There may be other states that do it this way, but Pennsylvania's the one I see most often. I've spoken to them, I know, a couple of years ago about this, and they did indicate that the staff does look at these filings, and it's not just a passive process such that if no one objects, it's deemed approved. They do look at it, and they would raise concerns with the commission if they had such concerns.
Right, but I'm really asking, did the commission give explicit approval per the Pennsylvania statute is really what I'm asking, and we're really not getting to the nub of that by your response. I think they probably have, but I don't know that for sure. I think Sea Council has come up, maybe can shed some light for us.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Robin Leone on behalf of Level 3 Communications. Yes, in answer to your question, the code section for this is somewhat similar to Maryland's in that it allows for what they call in Pennsylvania an abbreviated procedure. But unlike in Maryland, there are, I believe, 5 different situations in which you can get approval from the Pennsylvania Commission. One of them being similar to Maryland, if there is approval in a different jurisdiction. That is not what Pennsylvania relied on here. It's 52 Pennsylvania Code, Section 3.602, And it's kind of similar to here again in Maryland. The third scenario is when the issuance or assumption of securities that has a presence in the Commonwealth of less than 10% as measured by either the ratio of gross investment within the Commonwealth to the utility's total gross investment, and then another scenario in which the ratio of gross operating revenues from services rendered during the immediately preceding fiscal year also meets a specific level. So that is what the commission looked at in Pennsylvania. It has to look at one of these 5 scenarios, and it's kind of similar to here, where the company's presence in the state and their revenues are not sufficiently high enough to cause concern.
Right, but that's not what I'm questioning. What I'm questioning is, did the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission approve this, which is what our requirement is? And I don't see that. I see that they failed to reject, not approved. And failure to reject is different than approving, unless the statute says failure to act is an approval by statute. They're 2 different things.
So they don't use the word approval in the statute. Under section C of that same code section, the filing and registration, if you file a security certificate under this section, along with the filing fee, the certificate will be deemed, in fact and in law, to have been registered if no order of rejection has been entered after 20 days from the filing of securities.
So that's a statutory requirement?
Yes.
That's what I was trying to get to. So thank you. That finally gets to what I was asking. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Do commissioners have other questions on this item? Questions on other consent items? Seeing none, are there motions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. For item number 1, I'd move that we grant the requested authorization, grant the company the requested COMAR waivers for local exchange service providers, and direct the company to file a clean copy of its tariff with an effective date of November 26, 2019. For item number 2, I move that we note the financing by Level 3 Communications, LLC. For item number 3, I move we note the intra-company merger of Chantel Communications, LLC, and Shenandoah Cable Television, LLC. For items number 4 through 8, I move that we accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of December 1st, 2019. And for item number 9, I move we accept the negotiated contract for filing under rate schedule NCR, which is negotiated contract rate.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? The motions are approved. Mr. Secretary, the administrative agenda.
Mr. Chairman, item 10 on the administrative agenda is from Westminster Wastewater Treatment Plant. Request for approval to construct a generating station for a 3.25 megawatt generating facility pursuant to Section 7207.1 of the Public Utilities Article.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Michael Jang on behalf of staff. Item number 10 is an application for approval to construct a generation station. Westminster filed this application on August 23rd, 2019. The applicant is requesting approval to construct a generation station for a planned 3.25 megawatt generation facility. This generation station will use diesel as a fuel source, but would only operate during a power failure. The generation station will be made up of 3 generators. 2 1,000 kilowatt generators are expected to be installed in October 2020, and one 1,250 kilowatt generator is expected to be installed in February 2022. The company will not be participating in a demand response program because the generators will be only used during an emergency, and the local electric utility company, BGE, has indicated that a maintenance and operations agreement will not be required because the generators will not be synchronized with the distribution grid. Staff is asking on behalf of the applicant that the Commission waive COMAR 20.79.01.03C. COMAR 20.79.01.03C requires that, unless otherwise directed by the Commission, a decision on the application shall be rendered not later than 90 days from the date a completed application was filed. Under this requirement, the decision would have to be made by November 21st, 2019. However, if the decision was made by this date, or by November 21st, 2019, the letter notices that the applicant sent to each governing body would not allow for a sufficient amount of time for the parties to react. If the Commission waives COMAR 20.79.01.03C, the application will satisfy the requirements under Public Utilities Article 7-207.1. Staff recommends that the Commission approve this application and, on behalf of the applicant, waive the requirements of COMAR 20.79.01.03C.
Thank you, Mr. Jang. And Commission staff has notified all the relevant and required political representatives that would be affected.
I believe so, yes.
Thank you. I see your Appendix A that was added, including state delegates, senators, county commissioners, and city council representatives in Westminster. Thank you. Do commissioners have questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the application pursuant to 7-207.1 of the Public Utilities Article and grant the applicant a waiver of the requirement of COMAR 2079.01.03C.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, item 11 on the administrative agenda consists of tariff revisions from Sandpiper Energy incorporating an annual adjustment to delivery service rates.
Thank you. Do we have counsel for Sandpiper? No. Oh, yes, Mr. Quinn. Good morning. Staff counsel.
Hello, good morning, Commissioners, Chairman. Olivia Kirkendall on behalf of staff. Sandpiper Energy, Inc. filed tariff revisions incorporating the annual adjustment to delivery service rates as agreed upon in the settlement pursuant to Commission Order Number 87857 in case number 9410. In this settlement, the company agreed to report the annual number of customers converted from propane to natural gas and to decrease in revenues over a 6-year period. The company converted 2010 customers from propane to gas this past year, and only 2,050 customers remain serviced on propane. Sandpiper states that the majority of the conversion efforts on the Sandpiper distribution system will be completed by the end of 2020. The residential consumption charge for natural gas and propane both decreased between 1.7% to 3.3%. The commercial consumption charge for natural gas and propane both decreased between 1.4 and 1.8%. These changes are in compliance with the Commission's order. Staff recommends that the Commission accept the tariffs for filing with an effective date of December 1st, 2019.
Great. Thank you, Olivia. Does counsel for Sandpiper have anything to add?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some representatives from the company. We're just here to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'll ask the company. Good morning, Mr. Quinn.
morning.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So good progress over the last year, a couple thousand more conversions and a couple thousand left, roughly. Does the company see that rate of conversion kind of decreasing? Do you have a last mile situation where some of them are going to be more difficult to convert than others, and do you see that declining, or do you expect it to go at the same rate and finish up next year?
I've got Mr. Evergnam from the company who can get a little more specific and correct anything that I say that's incorrect. But yeah, I think that's probably fair to say. That would probably be similar now.
Yes, that would be correct.
This is Matt Evergnam from Sandpiper.
Matt Evergam, Manager of Rates and Regulatory Affairs with Sandpiper. Thank you. Yes, this will be the last year of the same pace that we've been at the last several years. And exactly as you stated, we do have the small amount of customers that will continue for another year or two afterwards at a slower pace.
Okay, well, good. It's good to see this conversion rate, and as we see it, in some regard at least, it decreases the rates for the overall. My question is, remind us why Ocean City is called out separately in terms of the rates. I think we covered this last year, but I need a little reminder as to why that situation exists.
Yes, Ocean City, and in the franchise that the previous owner had, Eastern Shore Gas, there was a provision in there where Ocean City projects would be paid for by Eastern Shore Gas to go in and put the pipeline in when Ocean City would go and do repavings of certain areas in the city. Certain times that they could actually do the, pull up the roads, get in there. And when that was happening, the previous propane company would be required to go in and do these projects. That was carried over to Sandpiper, but those specific projects are just paid by the Ocean City customers because it's an Ocean City specific project.
Very good. Thank you. I appreciate that explanation. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Additional questions? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the commission accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of December 1st, 2019.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, item 12 also includes tariff changes from Sandpiper Energy. The company proposes to incorporate a revenue reconciliation within Sandpiper's annual system improvement rate.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Margaret Tuberty on behalf of staff. With this filing, Sandpaper Energy, Inc. is proposing its annual update to the company's System Improvement Rate, or SRR, to be effective with the 12-month billing period of December 1st, 2019 through November 30th, 2020. The SIR is a volumetric charge that applies to the company's residential and commercial rate schedules for the sole purpose of recovering the cost of bare steel replacement in addition to the costs of distribution system and customer conversions from propane to natural gas. After accounting for the reconciliation of last year's projected costs with the actual costs, the company's calculated SIR remains unchanged at 40.3 cents per CCF of natural gas. For customers within the corporate limits of the town of Ocean City, Maryland, the Ocean City specific SIR would increase from 47.7 cents to 48.8 cents per CCF of natural gas. This goes in conjunction with the previous filing, but as previously said in discussions with staff, the company indicated that the majority of the conversion efforts on the Sandpiper distribution system will be completed by end of year 2020, with only low-level conversion activities and small-scale mains replacement past this date. Staff recommends that the Commission accept the revised tariff pages for filing to be effective December 1st, 2019 through November 30th, 2020.
Thank you, Ms. Tuberty. Thank you for the buck sheet from the team. It was clear and easy to understand. Mr. Quinn.
Sandpiper Day in Baltimore today, Mr. Chairman. But yeah, again, just here to answer any questions that you might have. We are in full agreement with staff's analysis and happy to be here.
Thank you. The percentage change year over year for Town of Ocean City, 30%, that's because of there's additional projects? Is that correct?
And as Mr. Everingham said, it was an agreement between the company and the city when they were doing road projects anyway and had the road open. It was a way to coordinate with them, and that's so they just more coordination.
So long-term cost savings.
Right, you have the road open already, might as well get some stuff done.
Okay. Thank you. Questions?
Quick question.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I've been asking this of all the guest LDCs, and I don't recall if I've asked Sandpiper this. Low-pressure distribution systems. Do you have any low-pressure distribution systems in the Sandpiper service territory?
Yeah.
Do not?
You have asked me that question.
Okay. Thank you for
Chairman
my memory as I get older
okay.
is not as efficient as it used to be. Thank you.
No additional questions. Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for item number 12, I move we accept the tariff revisions for filing to be effective for the 12-month billing period of December 1, 2019 through November 30, 2020.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, item 13 is a proposal from Potomac Electric Power Company and Amarra Power and Light to return overcollections from grid resiliency charges through the bill stabilization adjustment mechanism for certain customers and/or through a specific one-time customer credit.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Felix Patterson on behalf of staff. We're here to address today comments of Accounting Investigation Division, Bucksheet A2512, Pepco Electric Power Company, and Delmarva and Light Company Grid Resiliency Charge over collections. On July the 16th, 2019, Pepco and Delmarva made a filing to initiate the refunding of overcollection of each company's grid resiliency charge. Specifically, Pepco will credit its customers $1,105,338, and Delmarva will credit its customers $297,024. Pepco and Delmarva propose to return this credit to customers through the bill stabilization adjustment for those customers that are subject to the BSA mechanism, and through a one-time per customer credit for those classes that are not subject to the BSA. Pepco and Delmarva included credit at the monthly short-term debt rates. Staff recommend the commission direct the credit of $1,245,800 to Pepco's customers through BSA rates and a one-time credit to disperse overcollection from previously approved GRC rates. And direct a credit of $328,486 to Delmarva's customers through BSA rates one-time credit using staff's proposed allocation method for both Pepco and Delmarva. While staff agrees with Pepco and Delmarva that GRC overcollection should be returned with interest, staff does not agree that the monthly short-term debt should be used for the full time both companies held the overcollections. Staff is in agreement with the companies using the short-term debt rate to the expiration date of the tariffs, as the tariff specified that monthly over and under collections will be calculated at each company's short-term debt rate. However, after the point of each company's authorized rate of return should be used to be better reflect the time value of money. Used utilities authorized rate of return to calculate the interest is consistent with other forward-looking surcharges such as Strategic Infrastructure Development Enhancement, STRIDE. Staff calculated interest to the end of December 2019 based on staff's anticipating that the over recovery will be credited to the BSA in January 2020. Staff used the authorized rate of return for Pepco 7.43% per order number 88432 and case number 9443 for the months of January 2018 to July 2019, and 7.45% per order number 89227 and case number 9602 for the months of August 2019 to December 2018. Staff used authorized rate of return for Delmarva of 6.74 for order number 88033 and case number 9424 for the months of February 2018 to December 2019. In making this recommendation to use the authorized rate of return to calculate interest, staff took into consideration that the companies held the money for about a year and a half after applicable tariffs expired before making a filing to return GRC over collection to customers. Staff believes that Pepco and Delmarva will seek to get interest at the authorized rate of return for costs that utilities were not allowed to recover for a year and a half. The same method should be used for returning money to customers. Staff also proposed the allocation method for both Pepco and Delmarva, in which staff believes allocates GRC over collections as equitable as possible given data available. I'll turn it over to my colleague, David Hopkins. He'll talk about the allocation methodology that's proposed by staff.
Thank you, and counsel for Pepco and Delmarva should be on point to respond. Mr. Hoppick.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. So I just had one brief correction. So if you please turn to page 5 of your corrected staff comments. In the second paragraph, the fourth line, it says Schedule ORL. That should read Schedule OL.
Thank you.
All right, and I did not have additional comments on the allocation, although I'm available for questions.
Oh, Mr. Patterson set you up there. We were expecting more. Thank you. Counsel for the utilities, do you have anything to add, or do you wish to contest the modifications that staff recommends to your proposal?
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Although we believe that the short-term debt rate is the correct rate, it's consistent with the use of the money and consistent with what the tariff said, based on the facts and circumstances of this case and this matter, we're willing to accept the staff recommendation in this case and the staff allocations. As they noted, we'll pay interest consistent with that until the end of December, and it will show up on the BSA in January and on January bills.
Very good. Thank you. That makes it easy. Do commissioners have questions? Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for the staff, either Mr. Patterson or Mr. Hoppick. Good morning. Regarding the allocation proposal that you've made for classes, both SSL for PEPCO and GST for Delmarva. According to your comments, neither of those classes paid the GRC. Am I accurate?
That is correct.
So what's the rationale for allowing them to receive a refund when they didn't make a payment?
So my recommendation is that they do not. So
Okay.
the company's proposed allocation method would have allocated some amount to those classes. My method does not do that.
Okay, thank you.
With that, is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I move that we direct a credit of $1,245,800 to PEPCO's customers through BSA rates and one-time credits to disperse overcollections from previously approved GRC rates using staff's proposed allocation method in its comments dated November 19th, 2019, and direct a credit of $328,486 to DP&L's customers through the BSA rates and one-time credits using staff's proposed allocation method in its comments dated November 19th, 2019.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, item 14 is a request from Comprehensive Housing Assistance Incorporated to modify its Customer Investment Fund program by reallocating funds.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Matt Bonikowski for staff. As part of the Customer Investment Fund resulting from the BGE Exelon merger in 2012, Comprehensive Housing Assistance, Inc., or CHI, received funding for a revolving loan program for energy efficiency improvements in Baltimore City and Baltimore County households. CHI is requesting authorization to reallocate $43,021 from its loan pool to cover administrative expenses in fiscal year 2020. The Commission has approved similar requests in the past, including approximately $57,000 for FY18 and $54,000 for FY19. Staff is concerned with CHI's continued reliance on loan pool dollars to fund administrative costs. As part of its original application, CHI agreed to take responsibility for continuation of the program and the administration of the fund after the initial 3-year program period. We're now in year 7 and still receiving requests for administrative funding. In response to a staff data request, CHI indicated that it intends to phase out Commission funding, but has not proposed any timeline for doing so. While the dollar value of the request has declined over the past 3 years, the current $43,000 request represents almost 30% of forecast fiscal year 2020 repayments. Diverting such a substantial portion of returning loan funds has the potential to significantly shorten the program's life, reducing ratepayer benefits by lowering the number of loans available in the future. Staff recommends that the Commission deny CHI's request to reallocate funds from the Home Energy Improvement Loan Fund's loan pool to cover fiscal year 2020 costs. Should the Commission opt to partially fund the budget request, staff recommends limiting funding to no more than 18.75% of forecast fiscal year 2020 repayments, or $28,125. That 18.75% would be consistent with the original budget distribution, which saw 18.75% of a $2 million award dedicated to administrative costs.
Thank you, Mr. Bonikowski. Counsel for CHI.
Good morning. Phil Simons. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Comprehensive Housing Assistance, Inc. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. I would like to make a brief statement, if that's
Please.
all right.
And use this as your opportunity to respond to Mr. Bonikowski's recommendation that we don't approve.
First, let me state that I'm a pragmatist, and I see that the $43,000 request will not move forward. I'm hoping we can consider the $28,000 secondary recommendation from
Mr. Simons, can you speak up or get
yes.
a little closer to the microphone? Thank you.
Do I need to repeat myself?
No, I heard that, but
Thank you.
some folks in the back might not hear you.
Okay. Is this good?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. What I have to say this year is not a whole lot different from last year. The funding environment for nonprofit organizations has evolved quite a bit since the initial program. There has been a real trend to fund nonprofit organizations with restricted funds. Our supporters, donors, funders have provided us with their generosity, but have directed additional resources that we've received to very specific things that we can't use to support the administration of the loan program. Uh, Unrestricted funding, as it's known, is continuing to be more scarce than in earlier periods. So we are asking, once again, if you could find a way to provide us with a little more funding to get us past this year. We are in the process of receiving infusions into our other loan fund. The balance of our loan products is changing, and we can focus on changing the balance of how we pay for the administration of our total loan programs. But frankly, this is difficult for us. We understand the original commitment. We're not anxious to ask for this. We feel it's appropriate for each program to share in the burden of administering the program, and we would ask for your favorable consideration of the lesser recommendation if you could see your way to that. We'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simons. Obviously, CHI has been attempting to get on a glide path of self-sufficiency for a number of years. I understand your argument is that the environmental climate right now for nonprofits is such that you cannot get to self-sufficiency, at least by 2020. What confidence or assurances can you give this commission that you will be able to meet self-sufficiency, let's say by 2021 or 2022, or will you be back here next year asking for 20 or 30,000?
Well, this is extraordinarily difficult to predict. The funding environment is not always stable. Organizations that give to us this year, foundations and whatnot, don't always give the next year. It's impossible to give a real assurance. It's clear that we want to ramp this down. We want to meet our commitment. I don't imagine that we will be in the same position next year. We made 27 loans in fiscal year 19. We intend to make the same number this year. The volume of work is on this particular side of the program is clearly declining. It would be unfair and unreasonable probably to allocate this level of administrative cost to the program going forward. We're very much on a path to reaching a maintenance level where all we'll have available is the repayment money to recycle for additional loans at $150,000 a year in repayment. We're talking about 15 loans a year. It's a little over one a month. I think with another year of funding, we should find a way to manage this.
The monies that you're requesting before the commission today, it's to fund staff personnel costs, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. How large is the staff at CHI?
The overall staff?
Yes.
We employ about 28 people.
And how many work on this program? I know we have a factor here that we multiply by, but...
Sure. We have one loan administrator. We also have one housing counselor who, as part of the portfolio of services we offer in our housing counseling workshops, we always make an effort to notify the participants that we have loan programs available, including this program. So that's really our direct staffing on this.
I noticed in staff's write-up that CHI has estimated income, at least in 2019, of over $4 million. What is that income? Where does that go?
Where does that go? Okay, so...
because right now you're asking, as I understand it, your proposal is not $43,000. It's now $28,000 per the secondary recommendation of staff if we are not to deny. It's not a lot of money in the whole scheme of things,
It-
and yet you have income of over $4 million.
It is not. The funding at our organization is made up of approximately 60 grants. Each of those pays for something fairly specific. So the discussion of $4 million in a certain sense lacks context. We don't have the flexibility to maneuver funding from one program or another on a very regular basis. We have a very small slice of unrestricted funding. We have considerable responsibility for a wide range of projects. We are principally an affordable housing organization. These energy loans dovetail with what we do because it contributes to neighborhood stabilization and the ability of a homeowner to improve his or her personal situation, to lower the cost of being in their own home. But the other things we do foreclosure prevention. We do new home buyer counseling. We work with other neighborhood organizations and in the schools. We are we currently have several housing projects under development. Without running out the full litany of what we do, the $4 million goes primarily to fund those other
Okay,
things.
so those funds that income is effectively earmarked for.
It's tied up, yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Commissioner Richard.
Good morning. Just a couple questions for staff. Okay, so you came up with this percentage, the 18.75 percentage, and that is based on the amount of repayments that have come in this year, the 100,000 in repayments.
So the 18.75% figure itself, that is when the application was originally made for CHI to administer this program. They requested $2 million with 18.75% of those funds dedicated to administrative costs. That's the 18.75.
Okay.
And then it's applied to the forecast repayments in 2020 to arrive at this 28,000.
Okay, so is that in some kind of the agreement? The reason I ask is because aren't they actually looking to loan out $355,000, actually almost $356,000 next year?
The company still has significant available funds.
Okay.
I'm not sure that they're.
I'm just trying to understand why we're applying, if we're going to look at this 18.5% to what's being repaid and not to how much the company intends to try to loan next year, which would then make the $40,000 look more like 12%, 13%.
Sure. So staff's primary recommendation in this is to deny the request.
Okay.
We feel that continuing to transfer money out of the loan pool is just going to harm the program in the future. It's going to draw down the loan pool faster. It's going to shorten the life of the program. And so the 18.75% for us was trying to come up with kind of a maximum number that we would be comfortable with. And so we saw the original distribution between loan and grant programs and administrative costs, that 18.75%, as kind of a comfortable upper bound.
And
so
that was
we
just
wanted.
based on, is that a consistent amount, the $100,000 that comes in repayments, or does that vary year to year?
I expect it would vary based on the number of loans that are in service. The company may be able to further clarify.
Because the company does have to, it looks like, service 165 loans, okay, and that's a fixed cost. I mean, that, they basically tried to apply the work, the labor to that cost. So wouldn't it be kind of difficult for the company then to, I mean, again, if they've got one side, it's varying costs, and the other is pretty much fixed costs.
Yeah, as I say, we're mostly just trying to allow the program to run for as long as possible. That's our primary concern in this. And so we're not saying that the company should only spend $28,000 on administrative costs. We're saying the company should be responsible under its original commitment to cover the administrative cost of this program. And so any gap between what the commission funding is and what the actual administrative costs of the program are, the company should be the one responsible for funding that gap. That's what they originally committed to.
Okay.
That's the agreement we want to.
Overall, I guess, would you say the company's done a fairly good job? I mean, they allotted less than $2 million for loans, and in fact, with the repayments, they've been actually able to loan more than the funds otherwise would have supported.
Yes,
so
as-
they've
as
done
a
a good
whole.
job. They've done a good job in managing these funds and servicing the loans. In fact, I think it said that they haven't had any defaults. Is that correct?
That is what the company has represented, is they have no defaults. Staff doesn't have any particular concerns with the performance of the program at this time. There was 1 year where the company struggled, but they've recovered nicely from that over the past 2 years. We still think that the program is being administered well and is being run effectively. It's just our concern with trying to make sure that effective program is available to ratepayers for as long as possible.
Okay, I mean, that's my impression too. They've done a pretty good job, and the fact that they've managed the money well has led to no defaults, and therefore they've been able to get more money out the door. Would you agree?
Agreed.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Simons, I wanted to ask you a couple questions, if you don't mind. I'm well aware of Kai's good work in the community, and I wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm also well aware of the supporters who, in the legislature, some of who were my friends in a previous life and still are my friends, but I don't serve with them on a daily basis. Good work. But why do you think that original 3-year limitation on these funds being used that came out of the merger, these funds being used for administrative costs was put in place? I'm sure it was a selling point for the original proposal from Kai to say, look, after 3 years, we're going to pick up the administrative costs. Why do you think that limitation was put in there?
Commissioner, I would love to answer your question. My tenure at this organization is a little bit under 3 years. I wasn't present for any discussion of that. It is difficult for me to understand why anyone would have imagined there were no continuing costs.
I'm
for the
sure
life of the
I'm sure
program.
they acknowledge that there are continuing costs, of course, but
And the only thing I can suggest is where I was earlier in my remarks, which is the funding environment in 2012 was considerably more fluid than it is now. And I believe that unrestricted money looked considerably more plentiful than it does now in respect of the overall management of the organization.
I think that limitation was probably inserted so that these funds didn't get eaten up quicker with administrative burden, and the companies or the nonprofit said, we'll pick this up after 3 years, just help us get out the door on this. And here we are 7 years later, and we're still eating up monies. But I see your income over the last 4 years has gone up on average about $300,000 per year, from 2.8 million to over 4 million. That's a pretty good clip of increase.
It is, however, that income is, the large numbers in that are 2 very significant grants to do what we call senior home repair. These are, it's, if you will, capital funding to assist seniors who have needs in their homes, furnaces, roofs, whatnot, to keep their home in good enough repair to remain in their home. It's not available for other things. So, here we are. I would like to address one of the staff's comments, which I think may also address where I sense you are headed. I suspect we're really talking here about the 28,000 and not the 43,000. I think if you put a pencil to paper, if we took that much out every year, it would be 40 or 50 years until we exhausted the fund. I'm not seeing this as a significant diminishment of the fund. I understand that the commission would like to have every dollar from this point forward being recycled into the loan program directly. but I think that's an important bit of context.
So are you suggesting we should do away with the original agreement?
I'm not. I'm asking again this year to make an exception for the commission to approve it. I believe it was you, sir, who said to me last year, just because we're approving this year, don't expect us to approve it next year.
And
Is
I
that
expect
your
you'll be back
recollection?
next year, that's right.
Well, we may yet ask, but we have no expectations. We're here at your mercy, if you will.
I
We'd be
appreciate
grateful for your support.
I do appreciate that, and I appreciate the good work that you're doing, as I said up front. But I also think that at some point, we got to say, okay, the rest of these funds are going to live maybe 75 years instead of 50 years. But that's just my kind of view on this. I think this will be an ever-increasing eating up of the principal. The corpus of this money will go away based on paying salaries instead of serving the citizens of Maryland. So that's nothing personal. It's just my view.
Certainly.
Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question for Kai regarding the program's spending on marketing, advertising, and indirect and overhead costs. The Commission staff noted that for fiscal year 20, Kai will continue to cover those expenses for the program. Is that your understanding?
That is correct.
So, according to our staff, that's $30,000, so $30,403. Has it always been roughly around that same amount, or has it gone up or down? Or?
It's really based on the administrative load of servicing the portfolio. I would suggest it's very stable. I haven't studied it, but I'd be surprised to see it change much. The size of the portfolio has not changed.
So, is that a cost that is outside of the administrative expense? I mean, you know, in your request here, you've requested, I think it was, what is it, a little over $43,000, but Kai, on your own, is spending $30,000?
Yes, we believe the cost of maintaining this program is on the order of about $70,000. And we are able to flow some of this work in with our other work in ways that it is absorbed. There's clearly workload. We have, the accounting around a loan portfolio is significant. We have payments coming in every month. We have new loans being dispersed. We supervise the escrow. There's burden here, and there's marketing. We don't expect these loans to move on their own. We have to keep telling people they're available. So there are real costs.
So the marketing cost then for the CIF program is $30,000, $30,403. Is that's not including? I know you mentioned earlier that there are a number of other programs that Kai also offers. So is this have you been able to identify this as a separate cost, or is it just?
It's a joint cost that we estimate based on the balance between the two loan portfolios.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning again, Mr. Simons. Mr. Simons, if the commission were to grant staff's kind of a lower recommendation, but not the zero recommendation, would Kai be able to continue to offer the same level of service for servicing these loans and this program? Would they be able to provide the same level of service?
We certainly will.
Okay. And is it in last year's request, perhaps you can refresh my recollection, did the commission grant the full amount of your requested waiver?
The commission did.
And Mr. Chairman, since I'm last, I'll kind of give you my opinion here. It is my opinion that we would grant staff secondary request primarily because I don't want to cut funds off entirely for Kai. I think they've demonstrated that they operate well and provide a service to the community, but I think that interim reduction would put Kai on notice that there might be an even further reduction, potentially down to zero next year, and that we would certainly hope that Kai does everything that it can to try to meet its commitment from the original proposal to cover those costs itself.
Thank you, Commissioner Herman. CAI is not the only nonprofit whose funds we have some oversight over, and it's obvious that it is a challenging time in the nonprofit sector right now. But you do have commitments, and it's been 7 years, it'll be 8 years next year, on which we would like to see that these funds are being paid for in a self-sufficient manner. I do agree with staff's recommendation to cease funding, but I see the merit in Commissioner Herman's position as well to have a transition period. I would not look favorably upon another request from CHI next year, but I could see a path to voting in support of the secondary proposal to allow $28,125 to be used for your overhead and personnel costs. Do commissioners wish to state their positions before we take a vote on the secondary proposal?
I would, Mr. Chairman. I would have supported the $43,000 request primarily in that because aside from the work that CAI has done over the years with the CIF program, the amount of money that they're spending in marketing and advertising and attempting to continually promote the program is fairly significant, and we're talking a difference of roughly $13,000 for a fairly small organization in comparison to some of the others we've looked at, including state agencies that have asked for fairly significant amounts of program budget. But I'm comfortable with the $28,000 request that is recommended by staff. But had the numbers worked differently, I would have supported 43.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I will just say this. I agree with Commissioner Linton and the good work that CAI does. And I also have a kind of a personal thing with commitments. We should do what we say we're going to do. I would have supported a motion to deny funding per staff's primary recommendation. However, I also understand the message that Commissioner Herman has offered us with regard to sending a strong signal. And as I said last year, just because we're partially approving this year, doesn't mean that we will next year. So I appreciate you bringing that back up, and I will support the modified recommendation of staff.
And Commissioner Richard?
Yeah, I'm actually with Commissioner Linton on this one. I would have supported the $43,000. I think these SIF dollars have been well used. These were not ratepayer money. These were shareholder dollars for that program. I think the program's been administered quite well. When I look at the numbers we're talking about, as you noted with the advertising, but this isn't so much $100,000. This is more like a $450,000 or $350,000 program that needs to be administered to keep the dollars flowing. We've also got the fixed costs of managing the money that's out there already, which I think they've done a great job, and it made more funds available because of that good management. So again, that to me makes the calculation more like 12% administrative when you look at this $43,000. But I guess seeing the direction that the commission is going on this, I will definitely, of course, support the $28,000 recommendation. But again, I think the circumstances do change, and perhaps since this program was instituted, we should take a look at those changing circumstances and make sure we continue to support good programs like this one. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Richard. With that, may I have a motion on staff's secondary recommendation?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that we grant Kai's request limited to 18.75% of the forecast fiscal year 20 repayment receipts, or $28,125.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Simons.
Thank you very much. We're very grateful for your support.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, item number 15 is a notification of Washington Gas Light Company's intent to revise the stride surcharge for the billing month of December 2019 to $0.00 for all customer classes, and a request for a waiver of the 30-day notice requirement of Public Utilities Article Section 4203.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. This is Jason Cross on behalf of staff. By letter dated November 18th, 2019, WGL filed a notice to the Commission of its intent to revise its stride surcharge to $0 for all customer classes for the billing month of December 2019. In order to minimize the potential overcollections of costs through the stride rider as a result of the stipulation and settlement of case number 9605, as reflected in the Commission's final order on October 15th, 2019. While WGL filed revised base rates in compliance with the Commission's order on October 21st, 2019, the company did not revise the stride surcharge to reflect the recovery of stride expenditures through the July 2019 period to be recovered in rate base as approved by the Commission's final order. As such, if the Commission includes the current unadjusted stride surcharge in the December bills, ratepayers would likely overpay, as the current surcharge includes costs associated with projects that were moved into rate base in case number 9605, which could result in double recovery of a portion of certain stride expenditures. While staff would not typically recommend the approval of stride surcharge absent supporting calculations, staff believes that it's in customers' interest for the Commission to accept the company proposal to reduce stride surcharge to $0 for all customer classes, effective with December billings due to the aforementioned recovery of 2019 stride project costs in current base rates. WGL proposes that the Commission set the stride surcharge to $0 only for the month of December. However, staff recommends that the Commission direct WGL to implement the stride surcharge of $0 until the new stride rates go into effect, reflecting the uncertainty regarding the appropriate January stride surcharge, which is pending the company's 2020 stride rider filing, which is mail log 227353, currently scheduled for the December 18th administrative meeting. Any further overcollections or undercollections will be reviewed by staff within the context of the company's March 2020 stride reconciliation filing, which will account for the 2019 period. Therefore, staff recommends that the Commission direct the company to implement a stride surcharge of $0 for all customer classes effective with December billing and until a new stride surcharge is approved by the Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. I think my stride surcharge is actually negative, so a $0 surcharge would be an increase. Counsel for Washington Gas Light Company.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Paul Buckley on behalf of Washington Gas. Just a couple things. First, on behalf of my colleague John Dodge, I'd like to offer the company's apologies to your executive secretary for misspelling his name on the filing. Our first official filing in his new role. Shameful. As a punishment, we sent Mr. Dodge on a 2-week vacation. Regarding the filing, we appreciate that the staff effectively supports the resetting of the surcharge to $0. The timing of it is appropriate because we were monitoring the balance. The Commission does have before it all of the adequate support for the surcharge calculations, and in fact is scheduled to consider the reinstitution of the charge in January. So all in all, we believe that setting it for the $0 for the month of December is an appropriate action, and we look forward to coming back up in front of you in December 18th, where the matter will be taken up again.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Questions from the panel? Commissioner Herman?
So, Mr. Buckley, staff has added on that until the surcharge is reset. Do you have a? Are you opposed to that? Where does the company
So, Commissioner,
stand on that?
Since the matter is due to be taken up on December 18th, It's entirely possible that that day could be delayed. There could be things that run into cause for the surcharge not to be reactivated in January. Regardless, it'll be resolved in March when the overs and unders get reconciled. But it is our expectation, because we did submit on November 1st all of the adequate justification for the charge to begin again in January, that on December 18th it'll be authorized.
Right, but hypothetically speaking, there's a big snowstorm, you know, and we don't get to it, and then circumstances happen that it doesn't get, you know, it doesn't get reset until sometime in January. So should we accept staff's recommendation with everybody's expectation that it would be reset in December, assuming we don't get some sort of event? But is it necessary? Because what would happen if we don't accept staff's recommendation and we only do it for December? What would it be if we didn't reset it in January and something happened that we couldn't issue a decision for the January billing date?
Then we would begin to accrue a significant undercollection.
Right.
The alternatives, Your Honor, and I appreciate the issue, and the company did consider it. However, given the fact that if that eventuality occurred, snowstorms or any other kind of event, there still wouldn't have been a commission action to authorize a specific charge. So we would still have to be in front
Keep
of
it at zero regardless. So there's really no, if we were just to take staff's, you know, belt and suspenders approach, it doesn't really have an impact on the company.
That's correct, and the alternative to simply doing a 1-month suspension would be that you would then institute in January a charge that everyone knows would have been wrong. So we think the better part of discretion would simply be to see you in December, and if something occurs, we'll see you later in December or early January.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Buckley.
And Mr. Buckley, isn't it also true that if you did have an undercollection because of some delay in the proceedings, that would true up in March?
Absolutely, Your Honor.
Yeah, so I think the best course of action is staff's recommendation, which keeps it open-ended and doesn't force our hand.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the commission direct the company to implement a stride surcharge of $0.00 for all customer classes effective with the December billing and until a new stride surcharge is approved by the commission, and grant the company a waiver of the 30-day notice requirement of Public Utilities Article Section 4-203.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved. Have a happy and safe Thanksgiving.